Rain fell in relentless sheets over Monaco, turning the glittering city into a blur of gold and silver streaks. Waves smashed against the breakwater, their roar mingling with the storm's fury. Lightning split the sky, casting fleeting shadows that danced across the narrow alleys where few dared to tread. Among them was 7-year-old Lily, barefoot, shivering, and clutching a threadbare toy rabbit like it was a lifeline. Just a quick note: if you're new here and haven't subscribed, please take a moment to do so. Your support means the world and helps us share more heartfelt stories. She had learned early that hunger and fear left little room for safety. Each step through the flooded cobblestone sent icy water up her thin legs. Her dress, once white, now clung to her frame, darkened and sodden. Mud streaked her face, her hair plastered to her cheeks. Behind her, muffled voices and heavy boots had faded, but the memory of their threats lingered, twisting her stomach into knots. She didn't know where she was running, only that she needed to run. Away from the rain, away from fear, away from the emptiness of streets that had never cared for her. Above the marina, on a hill that caught the last glimmers of sunset through the storm, stood the Ward estate. The mansion rose like a fortress of glass and stone, its security lights glinting faintly through the downpour. For most, it was untouchable, a symbol of wealth and power. For Lily, it looked like a sanctuary, the only place where she might escape the night and the cruelty it carried. With small hands scraped raw on the wrought iron fence, she squeezed through a narrow gap, her body trembling from cold and adrenaline. The manicured garden swallowed her tiny frame, hedges bowing under the weight of the rain. She crouched behind a rose bush, droplets sliding down its petals and her soaked clothes alike. She might have stayed there, frozen with fear, until the storm passed, but then she heard the low hum of an engine growing closer. A sleek black car cut through the rain, glinting even beneath the storm. Inside, Nathaniel Ward gripped the steering wheel with calm precision. 45 years old, a titan of the real estate world whose name commanded respect from London to Hong Kong, Nathaniel's life was one of discipline, calculation, and solitude. Success had given him everything he had ever pursued, yet there remained a quiet void, a lack of connection he never admitted, even to himself. The car eased to a stop in front of the mansion. Nathaniel slipped out, coat collar turned up against the rain, keys clutched in one hand. Reports, meetings, and contracts danced through his mind as he walked toward the door. Then a voice, small, trembling, broke through the storm. "Sir, may I sleep in your dog's house tonight?" Nathaniel froze. The words were so unexpected, so fragile, that for a moment he thought the storm itself was playing tricks on him. Slowly, he scanned the dim driveway, his eyes catching a tiny figure barely visible in the rain. Lily stood there, soaked to the bone, her eyes wide, lips trembling. She clutched the toy rabbit closer, as if it might shield her from the world's cruelty. No one had asked him for anything like this before. Not a deal, not a favor, not a handout. But here, a child asked for nothing more than shelter. A corner of safety. The audacity and innocence intertwined so tightly that Nathaniel felt something shift inside him. In all his years of negotiation, boardrooms, and contracts, nothing had prepared him for this. The rain hammered around them, yet the world seemed to pause. For Nathaniel, the storm had become background, and in the foreground stood Lily alone, fragile, yet somehow fierce. The first choice had presented itself: turn away, maintain control, remain untouchable, or step forward, open the door, and let a little girl into his carefully constructed life. With a deep breath, Nathaniel moved toward her. "You can't stay out here," he said, voice firmer than he expected. Lily's gaze dropped to the puddles, but her small figure remained, a pleading, silent testament to hope clinging stubbornly to life. He felt a twist in his chest, an ache unfamiliar and unsettling. The mansion loomed behind him, a monument of isolation. Yet in this moment, it felt meaningless. All that mattered was the child before him, her courage in the face of storms, both natural and human. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling so their eyes met, finally lowering the distance between the world of the rich and the world of the street. "Lily," she whispered. The storm raged on, but for the first time, the night seemed to hold a fragile possibility that perhaps shelter and kindness might still exist in the world. If you want, I can continue section 2 next with the same cinematic style, building Nathaniel and Lily's first real connection inside the mansion. Nathaniel had faced billion-dollar negotiations with men who could crush empires, but nothing in his life had left him quite as disarmed as the sight before him now. A girl, 7, maybe 8 years old, drenched, trembling, and clinging to a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days. Her knuckles were white from holding it too tightly, her lips blue from the cold. "May I sleep in your dog's house tonight?" she had asked, her voice thin, almost swallowed by the storm. Nathaniel blinked, as though the words were foreign. He glanced behind him at the sprawling estate, manicured lawns, spotless terraces, the glowing windows of a mansion designed to intimidate. There was no doghouse. He didn't even own a dog. Yet this child, standing in his driveway, saw the smallest scrap of his abundance as salvation. "You can't stay out here," he said, his tone carrying a firmness he didn't intend. His instinct had been to answer quickly, as if his authority might somehow restore order to a situation that felt wildly out of his control. The girl flinched at his voice. She didn't run, though. She simply tightened her arms around her toy rabbit, her wide eyes fixed on him, unblinking. Nathaniel felt a pang, sharp and unfamiliar. He realized then that he had never truly been looked at this way before, not by his business rivals, not by the investors who hung on his every word, not even by acquaintances who envied his wealth. Her eyes were different. They weren't calculating or cautious. They were desperate. "What's your name?" he asked, kneeling slightly, softening his voice. "Lily," she whispered, as if even her name might be taken from her. The rain pattered against his coat, slid down his hairline, but Nathaniel hardly noticed. He nodded slowly, as if committing her name to memory. "Lily," he paused, his gaze flicking to the wrought iron gate where the storm raged beyond. The thought of leaving her there, barefoot, soaked, shivering, clashed violently with every instinct he had about boundaries, privacy, control. For years, his home had been a fortress. No one entered unless they belonged there. Yet what he felt now wasn't logic. It wasn't calculation. It was something deeper, a pull toward responsibility he hadn't invited. "Come," he said at last, holding out his hand. For a moment, Lily only stared at it. Her small fingers clutched the rabbit tighter, her thin body tensed as if weighing a trap against a miracle. Then, slowly, she reached forward. Her hand was icy, fragile as porcelain, but when her fingers curled into his palm, Nathaniel felt the weight of something he couldn't quite name. He guided her toward the mansion, her tiny frame dwarfed by the vast double doors. As they opened, warm light spilled into the night, casting golden reflections on the marble floor. Lily hesitated at the threshold. To her, the interior looked less like a home and more like a cathedral, glittering chandeliers, gleaming woodwork, paintings that belonged in museums. "Go on," Nathaniel urged, his voice gentler now. Her bare feet touched the polished marble, leaving small wet prints that trailed behind her. She turned in slow circles, gazing up at ceilings that seemed to touch the clouds. Her eyes widened at every detail, the staircases curving like ribbons, the glow of wall sconces, the muted reflections in the floor. To Nathaniel, it was the ordinary backdrop of his life. To her, it was a different universe. "Is this all yours?" Lily asked, her voice hushed, almost reverent. "Yes," Nathaniel said. The word felt strange, almost uncomfortable. He had always been proud of what he built, yet in her tone there was no envy, only awe, and something about that stripped the pride from his chest, leaving him with something far heavier. She pressed her rabbit against her cheek. For the first time that night, her lips twitched into the faintest curve of relief. Nathaniel watched her, his thoughts a quiet storm of their own. He didn't know why he had let her in. He didn't know what he was supposed to do next. But he knew one thing for certain: his life had just shifted in a way no business deal could ever replicate. And though the storm outside still raged, inside the mansion, a fragile calm had just begun to take root. The storm still beat mercilessly against the mansion's windows, but inside, the silence was broken only by the sound of Lily's bare feet pattering across the marble. Every step she took left a damp imprint, fragile proof that she belonged here, at least for this moment. Nathaniel followed, his polished shoes echoing softly behind her. He felt strangely out of place in his own home. The marble floor, the golden sconces, the towering ceilings suddenly seemed absurdly excessive in the presence of this small girl who owned nothing but the stuffed rabbit she held so tightly. She paused before a grand staircase, staring up as though it might reach into the clouds. Her reflection shimmered faintly in the polished banister, thin and small, a ghost in a palace of giants. "You're shivering," Nathaniel said quietly. He hesitated before adding, "Come. Let's get you warm." He led her down a side corridor, the glow of recessed lighting softening the space. The mansion had always felt cold to him, but tonight, the echo of Lily's footsteps seemed to warm its halls. At the end of the corridor, Nathaniel opened a heavy oak door. Inside, steam already curled in the air. He had asked his staff earlier to prepare the guest bathroom, not knowing if Lily would even step inside. Now, seeing her wide eyes, he felt the smallest surge of relief. The bathroom was cavernous, marble tiles gleaming under soft light, a bathtub the size of a small pool, and towels stacked in perfect white piles. Lily froze on the threshold, her chest rising and falling quickly. I can't," she whispered, retreating half a step. "Yes, you can," Nathaniel replied gently. "It's only water. Warm water. You'll feel better, I promise." Her fingers dug into the rabbit's worn ear. For a moment, she looked as though she might bolt. Then her eyes flicked to the steaming surface of the bath. Slowly, as though her body argued with her mind, she edged closer. Nathaniel turned away slightly, giving her the space she seemed to need. He remembered his own childhood: rigid tutors, rules, expectations. No softness, no warmth. He wondered how long Lily had gone without either. Minutes later, he heard the faint splash of water. When he risked a glance back, he saw her in the tub, her tiny shoulders barely breaking the surface. Her eyes were wide, stunned, her lips parted in disbelief. She dipped her fingers under, pulled them out, then dipped them again, marveling at the simple sensation of heat. "It's warm," she whispered, as though it were a miracle. Nathaniel's throat tightened. For her, it was. She leaned back slowly, letting her thin hair float around her. The steam softened her features, made her look less like a child fighting to survive and more like the 7-year-old she truly was. For the first time that night, the tension left her face. After what felt like an eternity, she climbed out, wrapped in a towel so large it nearly swallowed her whole. She pressed her cheek against it, sighing with a small, involuntary sound that cut straight through Nathaniel. He found a set of soft pajamas, one of the smallest sizes, kept on hand for visiting relatives. Lily slipped into them, the fabric hanging loosely, sleeves covering her hands. She looked down at herself, then at Nathaniel. "Am I allowed to wear these?" she asked. "Of course," Nathaniel said, more firmly than he intended. "They're yours now." She blinked up at him. "Mine?" "Yes," he said, realizing in that instant how little the word had ever meant to her. She clutched the fabric close, as if it might vanish if she let go. For the first time that night, her shoulders eased. Nathaniel watched her quietly as she stood there, small, fragile, but now wrapped in warmth and safety. He didn't know why this mattered so much, but he knew with certainty, something inside him had shifted. The storm outside rattled against the glass, but inside the mansion, a fragile seed of trust had just been planted. The rain outside had softened to a distant murmur, but the quiet inside the Ward estate felt heavier than before. Nathaniel led Lily through another hallway, past walls lined with oil paintings of stern men in tailored suits and women draped in silk. Generations of Ward wealth and pride stared down at the barefoot child padding along the polished floor. She clutched the sleeves of her borrowed pajamas, her stuffed rabbit still tucked under one arm. Every few steps, she glanced up at Nathaniel as though afraid he might vanish or worse, change his mind. "Are you hungry?" he asked at last. She nodded quickly, but her voice didn't follow. Hunger, Nathaniel realized, was not a feeling she needed to describe. It was the constant background of her life. In the kitchen, bright light spilled from overhead fixtures onto spotless counters of white marble. A bowl of fruit gleamed as though it had been staged for a photograph. But Lily's eyes didn't land on the fruit, or the polished silver appliances. Her gaze caught on a simple plate at the far end of the counter, a batch of cookies, golden brown, fresh from the oven. Nathaniel hesitated only a moment before sliding the plate toward her. "Try one." She stepped closer, hand trembling, and picked up a cookie as though it were something fragile. She took a tiny bite, chewing slowly. Then another. Her eyes widened. "It's sweet," she whispered, as though no one had ever told her food could taste like this. Nathaniel poured her a glass of milk, setting it gently beside her. She froze. "For me?" "Yes. For you." She stared at the glass, suspicious. "You're not going to take it back?" The question pierced deeper than Nathaniel expected. "No, Lily. No one's taking it back." Only then did she lift it with both hands, sipping so carefully that not a drop spilled. He watched her drink, watched her shoulders loosen, watched the invisible armor she wore begin to slip away. When she finished, she placed the glass back with meticulous precision, aligning it exactly with the edge of the counter. A survival habit, Nathaniel thought. Children like her didn't waste food, didn't leave a mess, didn't risk angering anyone who fed them. He pulled out a chair for her at the dining table, but she shook her head quickly. "I can sit on the floor." "I don't mind." Nathaniel crouched down so he could meet her eyes. "Lily, you don't need to sit on the floor in this house. The chair is for you." She studied him for a long moment, as if testing the truth of his words. Finally, she climbed into the chair, her tiny frame almost lost against its carved backrest. They ate in silence for a while, cookies for her, black coffee for him. He noticed the way she guarded each bite, chewing slowly, savoring it. As though she was storing the memory of the taste in case it never came again. Afterward, he suggested, "It's late. You should sleep." Her hand tightened around the rabbit. "I can stay on the couch," she offered quickly. "Or the floor." "The floor is fine. I'm used to it." Nathaniel felt something twist inside him. He stood, walked to the guest wing, and opened the door to one of the smaller bedrooms. A warm glow from a bedside lamp revealed soft blankets and a neatly made bed. "You'll stay here," he said. Lily stepped into the room slowly, her breath catching at the sight of the bed. She touched the blanket, pressed her cheek against it, then looked back at him, startled. "I can really sleep here?" "Yes," Nathaniel said. "This is your room tonight." She hesitated one last time, then climbed onto the mattress, sinking into the softness. Her eyes fluttered shut almost instantly. The rabbit rested against her chest, her breathing deep and steady. Nathaniel lingered in the doorway. He had given her warmth, food, and a bed. Yet somehow, he felt she had given him something greater, a quiet reminder of what it meant to be human. He switched off the light, leaving only the soft glow of the storm beyond the window. For the first time in years, the Ward estate no longer felt empty. Morning crept gently into the Ward estate, the first rays of sunlight spilling across the marble floors and filtering through sheer curtains. For years, Nathaniel had woken to silence, the kind of silence that echoed, reminding him of the absence of family, of warmth. But this morning was different. He paused outside the guest room door, listening. From within came the faintest sound, a child's laugh. Not loud or carefree, but soft, uncertain, as though she wasn't sure she was allowed to make such a sound. Nathaniel pushed the door open. Lily sat cross-legged on the bed, the stuffed rabbit in her lap. The blanket was bunched at her feet, and her hair stuck out in every direction. She looked up, startled, then quickly smoothed the sheets as though caught breaking a rule. "Good morning," Nathaniel said. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. I thought, someone might wake me up and tell me to leave." "No one's sending you away," he assured her. "Not today. Not tomorrow." She stared at him for a long moment before giving the tiniest nod. Only then did he notice her stomach rumbling. She pressed a hand against it, embarrassed. "Come on," Nathaniel said with a faint smile. Breakfast. The dining room was flooded with golden light. The table, long enough to seat 20, looked absurd with only 2 places set. Plates of eggs, toast, and fruit were arranged neatly, but Lily's eyes went straight to the strawberries. She hesitated before touching one, as if expecting it to vanish. "Go ahead," Nathaniel said. She picked one up, bit into it, and gasped. Juice dribbled down her chin, and for the first time he saw her grin without hesitation. "It tastes like sunshine," she said. Nathaniel chuckled softly. He hadn't eaten a strawberry in years without thinking of it as just another fruit. But in that moment, watching her eyes light up, he realized he had been missing something. Later that morning, Nathaniel made a decision. Lily needed more than just food and shelter. She needed clothes, things of her own, experiences that told her she was worth something. "Get dressed," he told her. "We're going out." Her brows furrowed. "Out where?" "To Milan." "Shopping." Her mouth dropped open. "Shopping? For me?" "For you," Nathaniel confirmed. The drive into Milan was a blur of streets, noise, and color. Lily pressed her face to the car window, wide-eyed at every passing sight: fountains sparkling in the sun, people bustling with shopping bags, musicians playing on street corners. She pointed at everything, questions tumbling out faster than Nathaniel could answer. When they reached the first boutique, she froze on the threshold. Rows of dresses hung neatly, soft fabrics in every shade imaginable. She reached out tentatively, fingers brushing over silk. "It's so soft," she whispered. "Like clouds." A saleswoman approached with her practiced smile, but when she saw Lily's tangled hair and wide eyes, her expression faltered. Nathaniel's gaze hardened, a silent warning that erased any trace of judgment. Within minutes, the woman was pulling dresses from racks, laying them across Lily's arms. Lily tried on dress after dress, twirling shyly in front of the mirror. Each time, she looked back at Nathaniel, searching his face for approval. He gave it freely, nodding, smiling, gestures that seemed to astonish her more than the clothes themselves. Finally, she chose a pale blue dress with tiny embroidered flowers. She looked at her reflection, then at Nathaniel. "Do I look different?" she asked. "You look like yourself," he said. "The way you were always meant to." Her lips curved into a smile that was both fragile and radiant, a smile that seemed to brighten the boutique more than the chandeliers overhead. By the time they returned to Monaco, Lily was exhausted, her new clothes folded neatly beside her. But as she leaned against the car seat, eyelids heavy, she whispered, "Thank you." Nathaniel glanced at her. "For what?" "For letting me feel normal." He didn't respond right away. Because the truth was, she wasn't normal. She was extraordinary, a reminder that even the smallest spark of hope could change everything. And for the first time in years, Nathaniel Ward realized that his life, once defined by wealth and power, was finally beginning to feel like it had a purpose. The Ward estate had grown quieter in the days that followed. Not empty, not anymore. Lily's presence filled the vast halls in ways Nathaniel had never thought possible. Her laughter rang faintly in corners that once only knew silence. She left tiny reminders of herself everywhere: a doll resting on a velvet chair, a crayon sketch taped awkwardly to the refrigerator, a pair of shoes abandoned by the front door. Nathaniel found himself pausing often, just to take it in. The mansion, once a fortress of marble and steel, finally felt alive. But not all silences are peaceful. Some hide warnings. One evening, as the sun dipped low and cast the gardens in gold, Nathaniel noticed something unusual. Lily had been playing by the fountain when she suddenly froze. Her small hand clutched her rabbit tightly, and her eyes darted toward the gates. Nathaniel followed her gaze. A man lingered just beyond the wrought iron fence, his posture casual, too casual. When Nathaniel's eyes locked onto his, the man gave a thin smile before turning away. That night, Nathaniel spoke to his head of security. "Have the guards noticed anyone unusual near the property?" he asked. The man hesitated. "A few. Same faces. Different days. They don't try to come in, but they're watching. Waiting." "From the streets?" "Yes, sir." Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He had lived his entire life in the public eye: tabloids, paparazzi, critics. But this felt different. This wasn't curiosity. This was intent. The following afternoon, Lily's unease only grew. Nathaniel found her curled on the sofa, staring at the windows instead of the cartoons playing on the screen. "Something wrong?" he asked. Her voice trembled. "I know those men." Nathaniel sat beside her, lowering his tone. "Tell me." She swallowed hard. They used to follow me. On the streets. Sometimes they tried to grab me. But I was fast, and I ran. Her small fingers dug into the rabbit's ear. They said one day they'd catch me. That no one would stop them. Nathaniel's blood ran cold. The realization hit him with brutal clarity: these weren't strangers lingering near his estate. They were predators, men who had once hunted a little girl when she had no one to protect her. Not anymore, he thought. 2 days later, the threat revealed itself more plainly. Nathaniel was walking Lily through the gardens when a black car slowed at the curb beyond the gates. The tinted window slid down just enough to reveal a man's smirk, Daniel Royce. Lily gasped, stepping back instinctively. Nathaniel's arm moved protectively around her shoulders. The car didn't linger. It rolled on, disappearing into the traffic of Monaco. But the message was clear. They knew where she was. That evening, Nathaniel held a meeting in his study. Maps, documents, and photographs were spread across the mahogany desk. His head of security briefed him on the men's identities. Royce and Bennett, small-time criminals, traffickers, men who thrived on fear and desperation. They'll test you, the security chief warned. Push boundaries. See how far they can get. They won't get far, Nathaniel said coldly. His hand tightened around the glass of scotch he hadn't touched. Not here. Not while she's under my roof. But beneath the steel of his words, a deeper truth stirred. It wasn't just about his property, his estate, his reputation. It was about Lily. Protecting her mattered more than protecting himself. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, Nathaniel stood at the window of his study, staring into the dark. He thought of the men out there, waiting. He thought of the little girl asleep just down the hall, trusting him with everything she had. And for the first time in his life, Nathaniel Ward realized that he was willing to risk not just his wealth, but his very life, to keep her safe. The shadows of her past had found her again. But this time, they would not win. The days that followed carried a brittle tension. Nathaniel doubled the guards at the gates, cameras scanned every corner of the estate, and cars patrolled the perimeter. On the surface, life continued: breakfasts with strawberries, Lily's laughter echoing down the halls, quiet evenings by the fireplace. But beneath it all was the steady thrum of unease, like a drumbeat too distant to ignore. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, when the world seemed briefly safe. Maria Leone, the social worker Nathaniel had contacted weeks before, had arranged a medical checkup for Lily. Routine, she'd said. Just to make sure she's healthy. Nathaniel agreed, reasoning that the hospital would be secure, neutral ground. They drove to a private clinic in Nice, the kind where marble floors met antiseptic hallways and the staff moved with polished efficiency. Nathaniel stayed close to Lily, his hand never far from her shoulder. She clutched her rabbit, gaze darting nervously at the unfamiliar walls. Just a quick checkup, he murmured. Then we'll go home. She nodded, though her small fingers dug into the toy's fur. The exam itself was uneventful. Lily tolerated the needles and stethoscopes with the patience of someone far too used to discomfort. But as Nathaniel signed the final forms at the front desk, everything unraveled. A nurse appeared, smiling too brightly. Mr. Ward? Would you like a moment to discuss the results? Nathaniel frowned. Already? Just preliminary notes. She gestured toward an office door. He hesitated. He never let Lily out of sight. But the room was only steps away. He glanced down at Lily. Stay here. I'll be right back. She nodded obediently, hugging the rabbit close. Nathaniel stepped into the office. The door clicked shut behind him. And that was when the world shattered. By the time Nathaniel returned to the waiting room, Lily was gone. The receptionist looked up, confused. The hallway was empty. Only the faint scuff of hurried footsteps remained, already fading. Where is she? Nathaniel's voice thundered across the marble floor. The receptionist stammered. She just, someone said they were taking her for a follow-up. Nathaniel didn't wait to hear the rest. He was already running. Through corridors. Past patients. Out the side entrance. And there, the flash of movement. A van door slamming shut. Lily's muffled cry piercing the air for a split second before the engine roared to life. Lily! Nathaniel sprinted forward, but the van screeched around the corner, tires screaming against asphalt. For a moment, the world narrowed to the echo of that cry. Then silence. The phone call came an hour later. Nathaniel sat in his study, jaw clenched, hands white-knuckled around the receiver. Mr. Ward, a voice drawled. Daniel Royce. Seems you've taken in a stray. Pretty little thing. Brave, too. But let's not pretend you care about her more than your money. What do you want? Nathaniel's voice was low, deadly calm. 50,000 euros. Small price for a billionaire. Deliver it tomorrow night. Alone. Or the girl disappears. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. If you hurt her. Relax, Royce interrupted. She's worth more alive. For now. The line went dead. Nathaniel stood motionless, the weight of the silence crushing him. 50,000 euros meant nothing to him. But the danger wasn't in the money, it was in the men who now held Lily's life in their hands. He looked at the glass of untouched scotch on his desk. Then at the photograph taken only yesterday, Lily in her new blue dress, smiling shyly at the camera. The thought of her alone, frightened, in the hands of Royce and Bennett ignited something fierce within him. This wasn't about a ransom. This was a test of his resolve, his love, his willingness to fight for her. And Nathaniel Ward had no intention of failing. Tomorrow night, he would walk into their trap. But he would not walk out without her. The night came heavy with rain, the kind that blurred the lights of Barcelona into smeared streaks of red and gold. Nathaniel Ward sat behind the wheel of a black sedan, his jaw tight, his hands steady on the leather steering wheel. Beside him, a duffel bag lay on the passenger seat. Inside, 50,000 euros in unmarked bills. Exactly what Royce had demanded. But money wasn't what Nathaniel was bringing. He carried something more dangerous, resolve. The directions had been scrawled on a crumpled slip of paper. A warehouse at the edge of the city, abandoned for years, now nothing more than a hollow skeleton of concrete and rust. As he drove through the empty streets, the shadows seemed to thicken, swallowing the car hole. He pulled up outside the warehouse, headlights cutting across the rain-slick pavement. The building loomed, windows black, its silence almost taunting. Nathaniel stepped out, rain soaking through his coat in seconds. He slung the duffel bag over his shoulder and pushed the door open. It groaned on its hinges, echoing through the cavernous space. And there, in the center of the warehouse, Lily. She was tied to a chair, wrists bound, a gag pressed against her mouth. Her eyes widened when she saw him, shining with both relief and terror. Nathaniel's chest tightened, but he kept his stride calm, controlled. Mr. Ward. The voice slithered from the shadows. Daniel Royce stepped into the faint light, his smirk sharp. Behind him, Tom Bennett loomed, arms crossed, eyes cold. You came, Royce said, almost amused. And on time. A businessman to the last. Nathaniel dropped the duffel bag at his feet. 50,000. Just like you asked. Let her go. Royce crouched beside the bag, unzipping it with exaggerated leisure. He thumbed through the stacks of cash, nodding appreciatively. Clean. Crisp. I like a man who doesn't waste time. Lily made a muffled sound, struggling against the ropes. Nathaniel's eyes flicked to her, then back to Royce. His voice dropped, ice cold. You've got what you wanted. Now release her. Royce chuckled. See, that's the thing about business deals. Terms change. Maybe the girl's worth more than 50 grand. Maybe we keep her. Sell her to someone who appreciates rare opportunities. Bennett shifted closer to Lily, his hand brushing her shoulder. Lily flinched, her muffled cry slicing through Nathaniel like a blade. In that instant, the restraint Nathaniel had carried like armor cracked. He moved. With a speed born of fury, Nathaniel lunged at Royce, slamming him against a rusted pillar. The man's smirk shattered into a grunt of pain as Nathaniel's fist drove into his stomach. Bennett roared, reaching for Nathaniel, but Nathaniel twisted, kicking the duffel bag straight into his legs. Cash spilled across the floor, bills scattering like leaves in the storm. The distraction was enough. Lily tipped her chair, crashing sideways. The ropes strained but held. Nathaniel elbowed Royce hard, sending him sprawling, then turned on Bennett. The man charged, fists swinging, but Nathaniel ducked low and drove his shoulder into Bennett's chest, ramming him backward into a stack of crates that splintered on impact. Sirens wailed in the distance. Blue lights flickered through the broken windows. Royce scrambled to his feet, panic replacing his bravado. "Police," he hissed. He bolted toward the back exit, Bennett staggering after him. Nathaniel didn't chase. His focus was on Lily. He dropped to his knees beside her, tugging the gag free. "It's all right. I've got you." Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady, stronger than he expected. "I knew you'd come." He cut through the ropes with a shard of broken wood, pulling her into his arms the second she was free. She clung to him, trembling but unbroken. The police stormed the warehouse moments later, weapons drawn, flashlights slicing through the gloom. Royce and Bennett were dragged out kicking and cursing, their empire of fear collapsing in the light. But Nathaniel barely registered it. His entire world was the small figure in his arms, her heartbeat rapid against his chest. Hours later, back in Monaco, the storm had passed. Lily sat wrapped in a blanket by the fire, a cup of hot chocolate in her hands. Nathaniel watched her, his own exhaustion heavy but unimportant. She glanced up at him, her eyes soft. "You didn't leave me. Not even when it was dangerous." Nathaniel knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. "Never. Do you understand? Never." Her small hand slipped into his. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe it. Nathaniel knew then that the night had changed everything. The past had tried to reclaim Lily, but he had fought it back. And he would do it again, as many times as it took. Because she wasn't just under his roof. She was under his protection. She was his. Weeks passed after the rescue, but the memory of that warehouse still lingered in Nathaniel's mind. He would wake some nights to the faint echo of Lily's muffled cry, the way her small body had trembled against him. Yet each morning, when he saw her curled safely in her bed, clutching her rabbit, those memories loosened their grip. She was here. She was safe. And he intended to keep it that way. It was Maria Leone who first raised the subject. She sat across from Nathaniel in his study one morning, her pen scratching notes across a legal pad. "You know, Mr. Ward, temporary guardianship can only last so long," she said gently. "If you truly want to secure Lily's future, we need to talk about adoption." The word hung in the air, heavier than Nathaniel expected. Adoption. Permanent. Binding. Not just protection, but parenthood. He looked through the open door into the hallway where Lily's laughter drifted faintly. She was playing with the golden retriever one of his staff had brought for her, the sound of joy, real joy, filling the house. "I want her to stay," Nathaniel said simply. "I want her to have a family. My family." Maria smiled. "Then let's begin." The process was meticulous, with court hearings in Paris, background checks, psychological evaluations. Nathaniel submitted to all of it without complaint. Wealth could have bought shortcuts, but he refused them. If this was to be done, it would be done properly. Lily, too, was questioned by officials. Nathaniel had worried she might be frightened, but when asked where she wanted to live, her answer was immediate. "With Nathaniel," she said firmly, gripping her rabbit. Then, after a pause, she added, "because he came for me." He didn't leave. Those words struck everyone in the room silent. The day the adoption was finalized, the courtroom in Paris was hushed. Nathaniel stood tall in his tailored suit, but his heart pounded like a man awaiting sentence. Lily stood beside him in her pale blue dress, her hair brushed neatly, though a stubborn strand refused to stay down. The judge reviewed the papers, then looked at Lily. "Do you wish Mr. Ward to be your father?" "Yes," Lily said, without hesitation. "And you, Mr. Ward? Do you accept the responsibility of raising this child as your own?" Nathaniel's throat tightened. He thought of the stormy night she had asked to sleep in a doghouse, of her first taste of strawberries, of the courage in her eyes even when tied to a chair. "I do," he said, his voice steady. The gavel struck wood. "Then it is so. From this day forth, Lily Ward." Back in Monaco, the mansion bloomed with life in ways Nathaniel had never imagined. Lily's room transformed, the pale guest chamber now splashed with color, shelves stacked with books and toys, walls pinned with her drawings. At dinner, she insisted on setting her own place, carefully folding napkins as though preparing for royalty. Nathaniel humored her, even letting her teach him how to fold one into a rabbit shape. In the evenings, the two of them would sit by the fire. Sometimes Lily read aloud from storybooks, stumbling over long words, giggling when Nathaniel gently corrected her. Other nights, she simply curled beside him, her small head resting against his arm as he told her stories of his travels, tales of distant cities and stormy seas. The mansion, once a museum of wealth, was no longer cold. It echoed now with footsteps, laughter, the scrape of crayons, the clatter of dishes at breakfast. It was a home. Their home. One night, as Nathaniel tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Do dads stay?" she asked softly. He leaned down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "This one does. Always." Her eyes fluttered shut, her breathing steady, trust written into every line of her small face. Nathaniel lingered at the doorway, watching. For the first time in years, he felt whole. Not because of his fortune. Not because of his empire. But because of her. Lily Ward. His daughter. The years that followed were not without challenges, but they carried a new rhythm. Nathaniel learned the small rituals of fatherhood, waiting outside classrooms, helping with homework, clapping proudly at piano recitals even when Lily hit every wrong note. She, in turn, learned to trust permanence. That no one would send her away for breaking a glass, or scold her for needing comfort on stormy nights. The mansion, once a fortress, now breathed like a home. But Nathaniel knew their story wasn't just theirs. Too many children still wandered the shadows Lily had escaped. Too many small voices went unheard. One evening, sitting across from Maria Leone at the long oak table, he voiced the thought that had been growing inside him. "I want to do more," he said. "Not just for Lily. For all of them." Maria raised an eyebrow. "You're thinking of a foundation?" "Not a foundation," Nathaniel replied. "A refuge. A place where children can feel safe. Not just fed and clothed, but loved. A home." Maria leaned back, smiling faintly. "And what will you call it?" Nathaniel glanced toward the garden, where Lily was chasing the retriever, her laughter lifting like bells. "Lily's Haven," he said quietly. The project began the next spring. He poured his fortune into it, not for profit, not for prestige, but for purpose. Old villas across the Riviera were restored and filled with bright colors, books, gardens where children could run barefoot. Staff were carefully chosen, not for their credentials alone, but for the kindness in their eyes. When the first children arrived, wary and thin, Nathaniel saw in them shadows of the girl who had once knocked on his gate in the rain. Lily, now older, walked among them, holding their hands, showing them the shelves of toys, the rows of beds with soft blankets. "This is your home now," she told them. The same words Nathaniel had once promised her. The press, of course, swarmed the story. Billionaire builds orphan havens across Europe. Cameras flashed, questions flew. But Nathaniel rarely spoke at length. He let the work speak for itself. And when he did grant interviews, he said the same thing, every time. "I didn't save her. She saved me." One summer evening, years after that stormy night, Nathaniel and Lily stood together on the balcony of their Monaco estate. The city lights shimmered below, the sea stretched endless and blue. She was no longer the timid girl clutching a rabbit, but a young woman with confidence in her stride, warmth in her smile. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Taking me in?" Nathaniel turned, surprised. "Regret? Lily, you were the best decision I ever made." She leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "You gave me a family," she whispered. "No," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You gave me one." That night, as the waves crashed softly against the rocks, Nathaniel thought about legacy. Not the kind written in financial reports or carved into marble, but the kind carried in laughter, in safety, in the steady heartbeat of a child who finally believes she belongs. Lily's haven would continue long after he was gone. But for now, as the stars stretched wide above them and the mansion glowed warmly behind, Nathaniel Ward allowed himself a rare peace. He had all the wealth in the world, but only one treasure he truly valued. Her name was Lily. And she was home. Sometimes, the greatest fortune isn't measured in gold, but in the lives we choose to save, and the love we choose to keep. Nathaniel found his true legacy in Lily, and she, in him, found a forever home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to share it, so others can feel it too. Thanks for watching.